Tēnā koutou katoa, nā mai haramai ki Pacific Storytelling. Kia ora, or haku haku, as we honour the local people of the Malibu and the West Coast up to Santa Barbara, I believe, Deborah. We have a very special guest with Judge Deborah Sanchez of the Chumash people. This is a special edition, an interview with Judge Deborah Sanchez, who is chair of the Wishtoyo Foundation in Malibu. Judge Deborah is also a Shmuich, hopefully I'm saying that properly, and please correct me, language teacher, the language of the Chumash. She is also a traditional dancer and a superior court judge as well, a very distinguished guest, and we're lucky to have her join us today. So welcome, Haku Judge Deborah.
Haku. Kiki Tanti.
Also joining us is my cousin and friend, Katz, or Arekatera Maihi, who is joining us from the metropolis of Whakatane in Aotearoa, New Zealand. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Katz, and there won't be many of you, Katz is from Ngati Whatua o Ōrākei and is an accomplished artist, musician, carver and traditional tattoo or tāmoko artist, and founder of Toitu Design Limited. Kia ora, welcome.
Kia ora tātou, kia ora rinata. Kia ora rai te whaenau anō i whai wā ki te mihi atu ki te kōrero mai ki a mātou. Thank you for having us here, Renata. It's nice to be a part of this international family. And yeah, I really enjoyed my time spending it with the Chumash people, and yeah, the experience was awesome.
Katz, I think what we're talking about is the fact that you were part of the delegation, which was for the Tuku Iho, a Living Legacy exhibition, which toured Washington, D.C. at the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History, and also was in Los Angeles as well in 2016 and 17.
Yep.
So it feels like just yesterday, but you know, it's incredible how the relationships have still stayed so strong. And the reason for this recording that's coming about today is that Katz was contacted by one of the Chumash ladies that actually he helped to design and to tattoo her in the traditional way. Is that correct?
Yeah. So, my chair's a bit squeaky, but in 2017, we were over at Venice Beach with our exhibition called Tuku Iho. At the time, I was the head of schools at the New Zealand Māori Arts and Crafts Institute, which is also known as Te Puia, and we had this exhibition happening there. And as Renata said, we had been in Washington, D.C. Earlier on in the year, and it was in October too, so it was pretty much 3 years ago, almost exactly, that we came to LA, and yeah, the exhibition was a hit, and I was approached by a family, a young family, and their father and mother to tattoo the much on Sister Sarah's chin, and I was a bit taken aback because I was tattooing at the exhibition. And when she asked me, I was like, oh. And usually I'm never lost for words. But just that basic approach, the way she approached me, she came with her mum and her dad and her cousins and sister, and even came with the sage and the tobacco and stuff like that. And I didn't know where to look. I had nowhere to hide because I was stuck at the back wall. But my first response was, oh, you know, if this is something really sacred to your people, maybe we need to find someone from within your people to do it. And then, and her response was, there isn't anyone. And that's why we've come to you. You know, I felt very honored and humbled, but I was scared. I was really scared because I didn't want to cross that cultural boundary. I didn't want to stand on anyone's feet. And that's the way, and personally, that's the way I work, is I hate, you know, crossing the line. And the father was adamant. He says, no, it's fine. My daughter really wants this. We need this for our people. And maybe at some point, you know, you could train somebody. And it was like, wow. I still hadn't agreed. You know, I had to think a bit more. And I think it took a couple of days before I said, yes, okay, let's go and do it. And so, you know, that kicked off a relationship that has spanned 3 years. You know, the distance is vast, but I'm connected to that family forever because of the work I do and the work I did. And I still have, you know, some of the taonga they gave me. And it's very, very special to me because of that. You know, some of the necklaces and even the tobacco, you know, that stuff is really important to me as a gift. And yeah, I'm still blown away by it. And to find out that it's growing and that there are people from within the tribe that are actually practicing now, it's, you know, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's something very special to be a part of the very beginning of a movement. I guess, and feel free to correct me if I'm overstating something, both of you. But in terms of the Mori Renaissance, we have, you know, similar to the Chumash, and I'll let you expand on this, Judge Deborah, but it was illegal to practice our traditional art forms. It was illegal to talk our native tongue. And a lot of these rituals and cultural processes were lost over time, or almost lost. And we were lucky that with institutions such as the Māori Arts and Crafts Institute, where Katz and I both have contributed many years of our lives, is that we were able to hold on to that knowledge and have a bit of a renaissance of culture, if you like, to the point where it is very common in modern day Aotearoa, New Zealand, to see lots of young women who are now wearing the facial tattoo on their face proudly and without fear of discrimination. You know, even up until recently, our national airline, Air New Zealand, was not allowing people with the traditional tattoo to work as cabin crew in the you know, on the planes. But that's something that's since been changed through you know, public pressure. The same thing with the armed forces. We now have people who are in the military with full facial tattoos. And that's something that you just wouldn't have even comprehended just a couple of years ago. And I'm interested, Judge Deborah, if that's something that you're seeing in the Chumash nation, in the Chumash world.
Yes, and just call me Deborah. You know, it was interesting. First, I want to say Katz and I are connected through my cousin Sarah. And when she decided she wanted to do that, we didn't have anybody that was actually practicing. People that wanted to learn and also the thing about our tribal markings were that it was also extremely dangerous. You could be killed because a lot of the indigenous people that came from the south, that along with the Spanish soldiers, they put us in a position where if they knew you were a California native, you were going to be killed. And California, as a state itself, paid extraordinary bounties on California peoples. No, the tradition is up and down the coast. And that's what I found was so fascinating about our brothers and sisters in Aotearoa, is that the chin tattoos were only for the women. That was one thing. And I visited there in Aotearoa in 2013. I went to Auckland because I wanted to see what people were doing regarding preserving the language, because I'm a language teacher. And while I was there, I went and I visited some different places, cultural places, and I didn't know too many people. The only people that we knew from there were from the southern island. So so we went, and when I saw there were, I guess there were some paintings or artistry of a lot of different things, but a lot of them were the women with the tattoos on their chins. And so I thought that was really interesting. And while I was there, I also learned that the Maori and the Chumash, we have a language feature that's not quite common, and that is we have single, dual, and plural, which is either it's one person or it's two people or it's three or more. And I was also fascinated with that. Now, there was a lady here that had we have an island, our traditional islands, we came from these islands. They dragged the last person off in the 1860s. But when we returned in our traditional canoe in 2001, it was a lot of our people had never even been there, to our islands of origin, that's what we call them. And we have some traditional stories about how we ended up on the mainland, but those islands now are part of the national parks and also the Nature Conservancy. We don't have unfettered access to our traditional territories, which is heartbreaking for us. And but we do have an annual journey that we made, and we were not able to go this year because of the COVID. However, that was the first time in over 150 years that we crossed from the mainland to the islands. And our stories, we have stories that, we are so connected to people in the other islands. And one of my friends from Hawaii said, you can't think of yourself as being on the West Coast because it's like Washington, D.C. is ruling where you're from, but we're actually on the eastern coast of the Pacific Rim. And so when you think about it that way, that is where we're from. Yeah. So we're all part of this family. And I also saw, while I was in Aotearoa, some of the feathered capes discs very much like ours. There were so many things. We used tree bark, we used feathers, we used all those things. I really felt a deep, deep connection. And when Katz and the delegation were here, more than anything, I think it's an inspiration. There's this deep connection that we feel, to the ocean, to each other, and that revitalization of the culture and looking to, there's hope, for our future. And especially here because they massacred the coastal people. And there are no, quote, reservations or lands set aside on the coast, especially not in Los Angeles, not in Santa Barbara, not in Ventura, not in Orange County, not any of those places. There's a very small, tiny sliver that is up north. But the women up north too, they also have chin tattoos. Their model's a little thicker, and one of the traditional tattoos from Hawaii, Keone, I think.
Keone.
He's the one that helped them. Yeah, he helped them. Now we have a young sister studying the tap art and to do traditional tattoos. So a lot has changed, but it was definitely just to show you were a California native person was almost like you're putting a target. You became a target for the people. Wow. And they were brutal. They were brutal.
Wow. It is it's a shared experience. I think Katz, you might be able to talk about this a little bit, but we did have the souvenir trade in the early days of Aotearoa New Zealand, where they would tattoo people and then take them and kill them and sell them as a souvenir. That was an unfortunate part of our early history as well. There wasn't bounties, but there was definitely money involved there. So it is interesting to see a similar experience between people so far away, and yet being very connected at the same time. And I guess I'm putting you on the spot here, Deborah, but in your oral history, as far as you know, have you ever heard of stories of the Māori or people of the Pacific? I asked this because I saw a recent article that actually showed that there was DNA found on the Marquesas Islands in Tahiti that connected to South America. And so the DNA evidence has finally caught up with the oral history of the people of the Marquesas 3,000 years later. But I'm wondering about the Chumash story, being a Pacific people. Did you have any similar stories?
There are stories, and for our people, they were called, like the people that were here or that came. There were also Hawaiians that went up north. They had a vessel that crashed, and they intermingled with the Pomo natives up north. But there's also stories about how Mothman, who came and spread his wings, and when the people wanted to go back, they crossed over from what is now California back to their islands. We also have stories about tall people. We were kind of short, but tall people. And they talk about these finding of these remains or these burials, so we do have stories about that. And it's really interesting too, because there were two linguistic scholars that wrote about how our language is connected to a Pacific Island language. And they were saying that we are considered what they call a language isolate. So our language, now there's maybe some disagreement, but our languages because there's 6 Chumash languages, but our languages are not connected to other people, like from the South or other places, but there is a connection. And there were scholarly differences about our connection with the languages in the Pacific. So that was very, very connected in our stories, in our traditions, in the manners and the things that and another thing too, our fish hooks were very similar in how they looked. And a lot of those things, of course, they scooped up, as you can see how built this place is. And there's a lot of things that were uncovered that were stolen or taken or in other places that we know. But I have seen fish hooks, and they look very, very similar to our fish hooks that you're finding in the islands, Aotearoa and Hawaii and places like that.
There's also one of the design that Sarah gave me, and she told me that it was referencing the sea urchin, which is and she asked me, do I know what that is? And I'm like a connoisseur of the sea urchin. All Māoris are. Most of us love them. And when she told me that was a part of the biodiversity and the marine life, my next question was, can you get some? Because you guys were ocean, you live by the ocean. There was so much, similarities. The waka building, the boat building, the sailing, the fishing, the diving, and all of that stuff. We would have survived at your place as you would have survived here, because and as you said before, Deborah, we have a massive respect for the ocean. Our spirituality, covers us in the ocean. It covers us on land as well. And that's one thing that I've always noticed amongst Indigenous people all around the world is that even though we can't talk to each other through language, we use silence to communicate. And that's beautiful, you know? We don't have to sit there and talk. We just sit there and we know exactly what's happening because of our, what we call wairua, our spirit is guided by something that is very similar to you guys, you know? I mean, that's one thing I really, you know, in my travels around the world is bumping into Indigenous people. I know that's, if you want to communicate, just zip it. And it works. It works. It's good.
Yeah, I want to jump in here and share a personal story about my great grandmother, who led the first ever cultural delegation from my hometown of Rotorua to New York in 1919. And it was a long journey. It took a whole month to get from Aotearoa to San Francisco, and then they traveled transalpine on the transcontinental on the Pacific, on the rail. They went on the train from San Francisco to New York, but they interviewed that delegation in the local Māori newspaper, and they talked about, did you see any, excuse my reference, but Red Indians? That was the term of the day. And the response was, yes, we saw them at the station. And the woman had the chin tattoos like us. And the question that they proposed was, maybe we come from here. And remember, in 1919, there wasn't as much information as we have available to us today, but already then they were thinking, what is that connection? And it was, you know, simply the chin tattooing. And if you think about it, it's not uncommon amongst Indigenous cultures around the world as well. I wonder if we can talk a little bit about the Chumash tattoo and then compare it, Katz, with Tamoko or the Moko Kauai, because Deborah, just your beautiful march, am I saying it right?
Watch, yeah.
Is straight lines, whereas if you look at Katz, he has the circular spiral designs. And so I wonder if there is some similarities and some differences there. So do you want to talk us through your beautiful march?
Oh, absolutely. Well, ours traditionally have been very simple lines. And mine in particular is, if you see the longest line, this is the present, the past and the future, because we're right in the Chumash believe in the three worlds. So the lower, the middle, and the upper, and we live in the middle world. So this is this representation here. And there's what I want to tell you is really interesting about the Māori influence is that our traditional lines in any documentations you see with these straight lines. They're not elaborate and they're not curvy. But lately there have been a couple of women that have, after we went in our larger delegation with 8 women, other women have also received their march. And those designs are more elaborate. They're not like some of the traditional designs that we had, which were very, very simple. So I think that has a big influence on the Māori, and the traditional tattoos have had an influence on our women that are here in Southern California, because I'm starting to notice that these tattoos have become more elaborate, more art than this, you know, for example. It's more art. So it's really, I do think that the Māori had a lot of influence on that, on this, and it's changed. You know, it's changed over time because of the gap, right? So up north, they still had some of the tribal markings, and then in the south, there were people, spotted people here and there, there was some women that got their march about 20 years ago, 20 or 25 years ago. And they were like the only ones. There's a very few. There's probably less than two dozen in Southern California with their march. But there are more people coming forward. And I think part of it is this, like you say, there wasn't really a discrimination now over there, but in here there's also this thing. You have a tattoo on your face, it's like a thing, right? So even before when I was getting my my march, it was last October, I told my people I work with, I call my court family, so those people that are essential in my court, I told them I'm going to be receiving my march. I'll explain what that is, and I kind of told them a little bit about it. But it was, and I think because I interact with a lot of the same people, everybody's used to it now. But when I first walked in, imagine I'm putting on my black robe, I'm buttoning up my robe, and I'm walking out before COVID, right? So I have a full courtroom, and I'm walking out, and then whoa. And then sometimes when you're interacting with people, like we call it our chambers, but it's basically just an office, they would come back, and then you kind of see people are walking in, they're saying, hello, and then they stop and your eyes get big. And then I had a lot of people ask me about it. So lawyers would come up they'd say, Your Honor, can I approach? Yes. And then they'd say, oh, I want to ask you about that. What does that mean? And they were, curiosity, right? So so it was an interesting dynamic. And so one of the things that the women that were ready to do this were between the age of 28 and 65. I think our oldest one that went in the delegation with the 8. We talked about the younger women because they're more, it didn't seem as viable to get their march right now because they're concerned about jobs. And that's a shame. But I also think that, like my niece, she's in her early 20s, and we were at a birthday party, and her brother said, you're not going to get that on your chin. What about when you go to the school and the kids you're going because they have 2 babies. And she said, what about when the kids go to school and you go and they're going to look at you and this and this? And she said, well, Auntie Deb is getting past her march. And he said, no, she doesn't. No, she isn't. And then when I showed up at the birthday party, he said, oh, okay then. But so it's kind of like also this statement that we're saying it's okay. I was prepared whatever the consequence, because part of it is first and foremost, besides being a human being and a living creation, I'm a Chumash, I'm an Indigenous woman. All those other things, titles, and those are just help me survive. But I survived to keep my language alive. I survived to keep my culture alive. I survived to keep the community together. That's what I feel. And everything else is just a tool to help me survive and help my community survive. So whatever job anybody is doing, that's how I look at it. I feel the same for myself. And what my mom said, I told her a long time ago when I became a lawyer. I said, Mom, if it ever comes to a point where it feels like a compromise, I'll have to walk away. And I still feel the same. And I think that's what gives me the freedom, because I know I can walk away. I've been poor. I've been on welfare when I was a teen mom, on welfare, single mom. And so, I've been with $400 a month and some food stamps. I mean, and now, having a job, it's great. And I love that, be able to have the ability to do things or travel and all, but at the same time, I already know what's important. It's right here. It's this. This is the only thing that my grandparents, before my grandmother died, she saw me become a judge. My grandfather saw me become a lawyer. But the only thing that really matters is what kind of person you are to my family. You got probably a sense of that, didn't you, Katz, with my family? Yeah, and that's the thing that matters. That's the only thing. All these other things, some people will give it some, credibility because of a job title or what, any accomplishment that they feel that it's important to them. But my thing is, what kind of person are you? Are you generous? Are you kind? Are you brave? Do you have courage? And those are the kinds of things that when we step forward, we went thinking only 3 women were going to get their march. All 7, 8 people said yes after. But I think it took that step to go forward. But I think that also seeing other people like us, I mean, that's a great feeling to be somewhere far, like New York or wherever, and you see somebody with a chin tattoo. Hey,
Sure.
Automatically that affinity is there, that connection is there, and that's amazing. And it's good to let people, the outside public, this place in this United States, know that we're here. We're 2% of the population. And then within that 2%, there's this many within that 2% that are following traditional ways. And so it became very important to me. It'd be very, very important to me that I live my true self in any aspect, whatever the consequences. I was completely prepared for it.
It's like you're decolonizing the system from within.
Yes.
Yes. And I think that if that's an outcome of just simply living your truth as an Indigenous woman and you're going about your everyday life, it's a very powerful symbol to say, I'm a successful person and this is also who I am. And I think that's a very powerful, powerful message. And I think as time develops and grows, you'll see more people like you. I'm sure it must feel a little bit lonely sometimes out there, but if Aotearoa New Zealand can be an example for you, it will not be very long before many more people are joining you.
And what a lot of us do is there was an article about a woman at Aotearoa who was a news anchor. She was the first news anchor that had her chin tattoo. But of course, the women around here, everything we see about chin tattoos, revitalization of our facial tattoos, we share it with everybody's sharing it with each other, because we're saying, look at this, and it's just good because we need to change the minds of the people. We don't need to do anything actually, but it changes the people because they realize, almost as if, well, some people I felt initially, and it could just be my own imagination, treated me a little bit different. And I told somebody once, hey, when I got my chin tattoo, they didn't drain my brains out. Hey.
One thing for me, right? One thing for me is that what I've learned about having facial tattoo moko is that, and you spoke about it too, Deborah, that responsibility we have towards the marks, towards our culture, and that responsibility of also educating people that have no knowledge about any of this, So like when I first came to LA, I was actually really nervous because I didn't know how I was going to be received when I approached customs. And this is what happened. I get up there and the guy, he's not even looking up. He just goes, papers. And I gave him my papers and it's got the little photo and he's like, oh man, that must have hurt, man. Welcome to America. And I was just like, is that it? Cool, I had overthought things. And then I started to realize, actually, if people want to know, they're going to come and ask. And I went outside to wait for my Uber. And you could see the people like having a side look, and then the brave people come up. Oh, hey, man, where are you from? And after explaining to them where I was from and what I did, they were like, wow, you're a long way from home. It's like, yeah, I am actually. But I'm here to meet my cousins. And that was, I knew I was going to meet some cultural people. So I was really happy. And I just wanted to mention, that we understand that feeling of, responsibility. And for me, the reason I got my full face is because my life is my work, and my work is in these hands. And I don't need to go and apply for a job at a bank, because my culture is my life, and it's all I know, it's all I do. And I'm lucky enough to travel the world. I've been lucky enough to travel the world and share this and the same conversations you've been having. In 2016, I was the first one in my tribe to don the full face. And then 2017, one of my older cousins got his face done. And then a younger cousin got his done. So there's about 4 or 5 of us now with full face tattoos. But we're still getting beaten by the ladies. The sisters are. I've tattooed about 60, I think, 60 chin.
Wow.
And yeah, and they're they're all different ages, from the youngest, probably maybe 16, right up to like 70 something. And that's a massive achievement for those people too. So it's really kicked off full on. I've got a face to do on Tuesday coming. I did a face last Thursday, like a man's face. So they're getting braver. The guys are getting braver now.
Just a reminder to everyone watching is that New Zealand essentially is COVID free, so they're allowed to do that.
Yeah. I know. I can't even go over there.
Yeah,
we got
are COVID
over here.
Yeah.
It's you both talked about how it starts a conversation, and I think that's what's so important, and that's why today is really important. We're releasing this recording on Indigenous Peoples Day. And again, I'm going to put you on the spot, Deborah, but did you want to tell us a little bit about what Indigenous Peoples Day means?
Yes, and it was interesting there. I think the demographics over time, especially here, have changed. And I think they used to say Indigenous people here were like a sleeping giant getting ready to rise. And there's been so much revitalization and coming along almost in connection also with people from the islands in the Pacific. And I think over time, things have really changed. So Indigenous Peoples Day is a celebration of our Indigenous peoples. I think just sometimes people think that we don't exist. We're wearing clothes like regular clothes or shirts or pants, and it's like they expect to see us because of the movies, because of their prejudices or biases in feathers and with deerskin and those kinds of things, which we want to wear as well when we're in our regalia, but they don't recognize us. And there's a lot of people from the South, Indigenous people from the South, that are also here. And they're, so to celebrate this, I think it's really important. There was a lot of people from like the Knights of Columbus that fought with, like, for example, LA City Council voted to celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day instead. We had celebrations of Indigenous people before those things happened as well, but also in response to the Columbus celebrations. So we did the opposite. And I think just by people sharing their cultures and the various Indigenous cultures, that's another way too to educate the public.
Yep.
We're here. We are here.
Yes.
Absolutely.
We have that all the time too. Taking opportunities out. Even though we've been doing it for a long time in New Zealand, there's still a faction of our community that is sort of not down with us, and it's like, man, we will, you guys will build your house and then leave. we are going to be here forever because we're connected
Yes.
to the land. You know, you guys will come and go. We'll never leave because this is where we are. And, you know, we're always, every day we must be reminding people of that fact. And they're a bit slow, I think, to be honest. Yeah.
And, you know, I try to explain this as well. Like, for us, our sacred bioregions are traditional territories. It doesn't matter who builds a house on there or they think they own the land. My grandfather, we used to travel from here to back to some of the traditional villages. What used to be they're now paved over with houses, expensive real estate, beautiful place. That's why another reason why we were killed is even for aesthetics. And my grandfather would say, they think they own this. And it's not ownable. It's in our blood, the people that we buried there, that connection. Now that's what a lot of people don't understand. Why are we so tied to the land? This land, we've been here since time immemorial, and in the United States, on the Chumash Islands, they were the oldest human remains that were found in this country. So so when we talk about that time immemorial being here forever, that land, the essence of our deceased, of our ancestors are here. There's no place to go. We're not going. We're not going to be anywhere. And then I told the story about once, and it was up in the state of Washington on the coast. There was a very famous fishing and lands rights activist named Billy Frank. And when he came to our island, they came to celebrate with us because we had returned. And one of the things he told was a story about, he goes, you know, we're planting cedar trees now for the future generations. And he says, only thing is the cedar tree takes 1,000 years to grow to the point where we can make a canoe, right? And so I thought about that. I said, in 1,000 years, will the United States be here? Right? We will. We will. And so we're doing today what we need to do for our future generations. No matter how many people they think we're a small part, but it's a big impact. Big.
Beautiful. And I think I speak on behalf of our entire culture on the other side of the world that it's been our pleasure to help play a small role in that change and in that renaissance of culture with the Chumash people in particular. Katz, you know, I'm just observing here and just completely blown away that you were almost a pioneer in the Chumash culture.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Such
Katz,
an
I'm
honor,
going to tell you, when I got my moch and we saw each other, we were at a park, and she went over there and she said, "You got your moch," and we hugged each other, we embraced each other, because she's the youngest of our cousins, and I'm the oldest of the cousins.
Wow.
The Alpha and the Omega. So we are the only people within our huge, because in our Otam, I'm also an Otam native, so in our tradition, those generations, they're called brothers and sisters. And so we're the only ones in that generation that have our moch, you know. So it was really an embrace that was very profound. So yes, absolutely. I think that when you made that decision and my family decided that this was going to be very important to find the traditional tattooists and to go forward, it was a change also in the frame of mind. And then when we saw each other and that embrace, it was like a connection all through history, you know, through time, because she was the younger and I was the older.
Yeah.
Not that much older. No, just kidding.
Not much older at all, I'm sure. I just want to quickly touch on something else that I picked up there as you talked about the tap tattooing, or the, you know, the how do we kuwaito uhi.
Yeah.
That you're teaching that sort of a practice as well. So it's not just the visible representation, but also the art form.
the art, right? And there've been the women have been sharing all these different ways, because some of the ways were that you would actually
Stitch
cut.
it.
They would
Oh.
cut the skin and then rub the mixture like a ash and
Yep.
into the skin, and then it would heal into the art. But there's also cactus needles that were used, they tie them onto a stick and then they use them that way. There was there were other things. Also, a small piece of we call it chert. It's like a stone that can be
Yep. Sharp.
very hard. Yeah, like
Yep.
very hard but very sharp. So those items were used too. And so part of this whole discussion before we even got our moch, we had one of the sisters that was doing their master's degree. She's a Hushaman. She came and she talked to us about all these different things that she was finding in her studies. And so we talked about the art of the tattoo. We talked about the tools that were used. We talked about present day concerns and how to address them. We talked as women when we first met.
Awesome.
When the women were deciding to do this, when we first met, that probably 3/4 of the conversation had nothing to do with the march. It had everything to do with women, being women, the culture, standing for the culture, standing for the future generations. And then the last part, we talked about it. But then there was a presentation which was more educational, where the women were talking about, the one woman was talking to us about those tools, those traditional tools and other things that she had learned in her studies. So we talked about that, and then we met again, and then we finally made everybody already knew the decision was made for 3 of us, which I was one of them, and then later the other 4 or 5 joined in the end.
You started a movement.
Katz started it.
Yeah.
We have to get you back over here when COVID.
Oh yeah, man.
When COVID figures itself out, we need you to be back over here, Katz.
Yeah, myself, Jacob. So there was 3 of us that turned up that afternoon. That evening was myself, Jacob, Tautari, who was the other tattooist, and Rick Peters. He's a greenstone carver. And we've all made a pact that we're coming back. As soon as we can allow, we want to come back so that we can witness the next sit down and be a part of that. That would be awesome for us.
Mm.
We all want to do it, and that's the cool thing. Is I still don't really, it hasn't dawned on me exactly what we did, but listening to your conversation and how much it's stimulated the drive and the desire for the people to do it, it means so much to me. It's massive. I'm only just starting to click onto what it actually means. When I was told that a few weeks ago that more women have got them done, I was just like, by who? And then they said, we've got our own artist. And I was just like, yes! Our job is done. That's what I said, my job is done. Now I know that that part of the culture will be revived and live forever now, And that's huge for this little Māori boy from down here. and for our culture to be a part of the revival is very special.
Absolutely, and we're watching with interest, Deborah. There are people who are very, very invested in watching you succeed and watching the Chumash develop and grow. We send the well wishes from an entire nation to yours.
Oh yeah, man. Yeah, man.
And we look forward to checking back in on your progress. We will be publishing this across our channels to help promote Indigenous Peoples Day, but that doesn't stop there. I think this is a conversation that we should be trying to pursue and catch up on a regular basis, because I think there's learnings from both sides. We can learn from each other through our shared experiences, and I think today is very powerful, and it won't, as Katz said, it's sort of sometimes it won't dawn on you for a little while. but you can already feel it. I felt as an observer today and a facilitator to bring you both together. I've just been almost speechless sitting here and watching. So thank you both. It's just a beautiful thing to see.
I can't wait to tell Sarah.
Oh, yes, give her my love.
I'm gonna have to call her. I will. Yeah, I want to send you some pictures. And on one of the emails we have Katz is on there, right? So I'll send you a picture of Sarah with hers and
Thank you.
pictures from back in the day.
Yep.
Beautiful.
And the whole delegation, when we were at the Chumash village, we took a picture with everybody.
Yeah,
We
that's
had
right. I see that.
some of other native brothers and sisters from the south of us, the Tongva. They were also the only ones with the type of canoe we have, the only ones. So there are only 3 places, and one in Chile and one in Oceania.
Yeah.
Those kinds of canoes.
We should schedule another interview to just cover that alone. I think that's a whole subject in itself. Traditional navigation. We weren't stationary people. We got around.
No.
Yeah, and I definitely feel like in this mindset that we're coming back together, all of us,
Yeah.
in the Pacific, all of our peoples, you know, and that to me is supremely comforting. It's comforting.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, thank you both for your time. I know you're busy people, but from the bottom of my heart, I thank you both. And if you have any last words, feel free.
Oh, for me, I'm about this far from crying. Just with joy and love for this whole situation, really. It's been a massive interaction, and you know, to know that your Sarah's family is, you know, that's for me, that's huge too. And I'm glad that we met this way.
Me too.
It's pity it wasn't face to face, but this is just as good.
But one day.
One day, for sure, man, for sure. Yeah, thank you too, Ren, for considering me to be a part of this conversation. I feel truly honored. Kia ora.
Kapai. Kapai. All right, well, thank you again, and thank you everyone for your time, and see you online. Don't forget to like our socials, Pacific Storytelling.
Kia ora.